Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, joined as always by one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. I'm recovering well.
Recovering well from
yesterday, my Michigan Wolverines losing in the NCAA tournament.
Just had to get that out there. Had to get that out there.
It was bad.
But as always, we do have a special guest here tonight breaking down Penn State prospects from Black Shoes down. Lando Landers-Nolan. Lando, how are you?
Doing all right. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. It's a sunny day out here on the West Coast. Kind of got just enjoying the day, I would say. But it's always a great day when you can talk football and talk some Pennsylvania prospects, especially coming out of Penn State. I guess we could really just kick things off right at the top. Mika Parsons, that's one of the more talented linebackers in the draft, kind of projected to be the top linebacker off the board. I'm just kind of curious, Lando, just off the top here, was his presence deeply felt when he wasn't on the field last year for Penn State?
Yeah, I think Mika is a guy that he's so versatile, and he's almost equally as important off the field in terms of his passion and his drive to be the best as he is important on the field. He can play multiple linebacker positions. Certainly, Penn State has, being linebacker was able to sort of pick up the slack, but you're not going to be able to replace the production that Mika Parsons can provide.
When he gets into the NFL, where do you see him positioning? Is he straight up middle linebacker? Do you think he's more of a sub-package specialist who can also play every down? But where do you think he really is going to shine?
So I mean, he really, his closing speed, his pursuit, I think, is really a strength of his, and he's just a ferocious tackler. So I think anywhere that he can be put where he's not going to have to cover too much, I think that's a area of need that he needs to improve on, is his ability to cover, and especially his ball skills aren't the best. That's probably his only area that I can say in terms of weakness. So if he can go to a team that allows him just to kind of be rangy and go after guys and hit guys, I think that's going to be the best place for him.
Now, Parsons, he tested crazy at his pro day. Do you think that helped cement his stock as one of those top half of the first round guys?
Oh, for sure. It's been interesting watching different mock drafts because he generally seems to be in that 7 to 15 kind of range. But then there are some outliers. I saw a draft the other day that had him going 29th. I've seen 27th, 23rd. But yeah, I think his pro day certainly helped. The thing with Mika, though, is people already kind of know what he does. So he really didn't have anything to gain so much as if he were to disappoint, he would have lost. I know that they were kind of scrutinizing a little bit of his direction, ability to change direction, like his shuttle kind of times are a little slower than people expected. But that doesn't really kind of speak to what he can do on the field.
Yeah, it's the Steelers. Steelers, of course, have Devin Bush right now, and you of course got to see Devin Bush play. Yeah. How would you compare the two of those?
I think they're similar. I mean, Devin Bush was certainly a stud at Michigan, but to be honest, I was a little surprised to see how well he played for the Steelers. I think they have very similar attributes. I was trying to think of, when I was driving up to my family here today, of a good Steelers comparison for Mika. And my brother is a Steelers fan, and he, growing up, his favorite player was Greg Lloyd. And I really, for some reason, I think Mika really fits that mold. I think he'd be a great compliment to Devin Bush, though.
Now, Parsons, he did have a little bit of off-the-field concerns going back to last year. Is that something teams should be worried about, or is that something that people think will get kind of brought back in check?
Yeah, I don't think, given the way that those allegations panned out in terms of it's being smoke, but not a lot of fire there, and they got dismissed. I think that was, Micah is a confident guy. He's gonna bring attention, but he's not the kind of person that would do anything to distract from the team. He's not gonna. He does not have any character issues, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't anticipate the allegations that were reported being a habit down the line.
It's interesting hearing you compare. Say he reminds you a bit of Greg Lloyd, because I actually think he looks similar to a guy who played with Greg Lloyd in Chad Brown, who then filled in for people. He was as that kind of middle linebacker who has that playmaking. Let's go, crack into people. Let's good hitter, can blitz. I also think he'd be a great fit with Greg Lloyd and with Devin Bush. Wow. And if he manages to somehow fall to the end of the first round, I hope he's a Steeler. Do you think Parsons is more of a 4-3 inside linebacker? Do you think he's more of a 4-3 outside linebacker, or more of a 3-4 inside? You said he's not really a coverage guy at this point, similar to Devin Bush wasn't the best coverage guy when he came out either. Do you see him being more attractive to a 4-3 team where he can, where he would be able to either sit in the middle or slide out side, or do you think a 3-4 team where they can really kind of protect him from coverage is a better way to go? So,
yeah, I mean, I think 4-3 could work. I think, being a Giants fan, I know that's an attractive spot for me to get him, because I think he could be maybe even a stand-up kind of a rush guy. When they said he wasn't a great cover guy, I think it's more of the ball skill side. He can stay with guys. So it's more about being able to track the ball. So I think a 4-3, I think he can work in either system, but I think 4-3, teams shouldn't be going into it feeling like they have to protect him, like, to use your words. I don't think that that's going to be, he's not going to be a liability in that sense.
Okay.
So would it be fair to say that linebacker U is alive and well at Penn State?
100%. Yeah, just reloading, our next kind of, we have Brandon Smith is kind of our next guy up. And we have some other great linebackers too, but I think he's the kind of the next Parsons, sort of following in the vein of guys like LeVar and, Postlesny and Sean Lee. So.
and on and on and on and on and on. Geoffrey, exactly. Geoffrey, do you have anything else on Mika Parsons before we move on to the next prospect?
Not on Parsons, no.
Well, if you want to, next we can jump into Jason Olay, the edge rusher, of course. Of course, Penn State, more that 40 front guy with his hand down in the turf. Is he someone that could stand up and play outside linebacker?
Yeah. Yes. I think, I have a lot of cautious optimism about Jason. My initial reaction is I get Aaron Maben flashbacks when I look at him as being a guy that's got great speed, great athleticism, all those measurables. I mean, you saw his pro day, everyone was going nuts with these numbers, but we expected him to have those numbers. I mean, maybe not the 40 time, not quite to that extent, but we knew he was going to test really well. It's just more of, he had 0 sacks last year. And that's something that a lot of Penn State fans are like, well, why are you going out? Why are you leaving school now? You got 0 sacks. He's got the potential. So that's why I had the Aaron Maben comparison about him. Is, Maben was drafted, 10th, I think?
Real high.
Yeah, very high.
No, and with both the Bills and the Jets, didn't really do a whole lot. And that concerns me. But I think, again, he's got the athleticism to play outside if he needs to. And he could develop into a solid defensive end. But right now, if I were a Steelers fan, I would not. I know that he's projecting around that area, where the Steelers could pick him up. I mean, I'd rather him go to Pittsburgh than Dallas, for example. So.
Oh man! Well, around here we've actually had some local Steelers sports talk people saying the Steelers are going to pick an outside linebacker in the first round, which of course we don't. That's not a big need, so it's kind of crazy. But if that were to happen, Jason Olay actually reminds me of a guy who just left Pittsburgh with his athletic profile, his rawness, but also on film he shows a lot of different things he can do. He may not be putting up stats, but he does a lot. Can you tell us about how differently Penn State uses its defensive ends than like a place like in Ohio State where Chase Young could just rush the passer every snap and not have to worry about anything else?
So, I mean, the thing that since when Sean Spencer is now, in the NFL, came in, they started really rotating their defensive end and tackles a lot. And unfortunately, the defensive ends have really had to pick up more of the slack, not just in pass rushing, but especially with run defense, because the Penn State defensive tackles have not been an area of great strength for a while. So that's really the defensive ends really have had to really kind of shoulder all of the load defensively, not just provide the pressure, but be run stoppers as well. So that's why you don't see those 15 sack seasons by a lot of defensive ends for Penn State, because they're rotating in and out, but they're also kind of playing double duty.
Gotcha. Now, with Olay as well, what would you say his best attribute is?
His speed and athleticism by far, which again, I don't mean to sound negative because I love him and I want him to do well. But I worry that that's his go-to move, because he knows he can get by anybody. But in the NFL, there are always going to be faster guys. So that's definitely a concern. But I think the speed and athleticism is definitely a strength. He's working on his power kind of moves, but certainly his ability to chase down guys is pretty impressive.
Yeah, he when you look at the range in the NFL of guys who come out like that, you have a guy like a Bud Dupree who ends up developing and having, getting some pass rush moves and being a valuable pass rusher. And you got guys like Jadeveon Clowney, who is, that level of athletic freak, but even bigger, and just doesn't seem to do anything with it. How much risk do you see in Olay? Is this a guy where, like, if he may not be a 10 sack guy, but he's going to be a valuable, he's going to be a valuable guy out there who does a lot of different things for you? Or is there a chance he could end up just being a guy that you're just like, he's not really a football player. He's just a freakish athlete and we can't use him in the NFL much?
So here's what I'll say. I think the teams that should look to draft him early would be teams that can afford to have him kind of learn more about the position, kind of on the job. Again, a team like the Giants, who really needs someone to be a disruptor, they should not reach for Olay until the second round. So I think he's going to be productive no matter what. It's really, is he going to be that instant impact right away? My gut is saying 2, 3, 4 years, maybe. I think he'll start to really impress people, but I don't see him as being a year one kind of phenom. So I think eventually he's going to be productive. It just depends on where he goes and kind of what other threats on that line or on the back front seven or back seven are there along with him.
Now, last thing for me on Olay, Geoffrey, if you have anything extra, you can add it. But you mentioned it earlier. He didn't have any sacks last year. Is that a concern, especially in the NFL? And typically that's where the guys make their money. Is if you break 10 sacks, probably means you're going to get paid a ton of cash. Do you think that that's a bit of a concern, or is that something that we can overlook?
It's easy to say, well, the pandemic, that's part of the reason. I think, I've said this too, that people didn't know who he was last year, or in 2019, when he really started to impress towards the end of the season. So I think teams kind of knew what he was about and did double team him a little bit. and that enabled guys like Shaka Toney and some of the other defensive linemen to sort of pick up the slack. And, people will point out that, yes, he didn't have any sacks, but he certainly was productive. If you look at the analytics, he was involved in lots of the run plays, and he certainly made an impact. It just wasn't the impact that people were expecting.
I'm gonna piggyback right off of that. You brought up Shaka Toney, and his pro day numbers are pretty close to Jason Oweh's. They're not like that level of elite, but they're really good numbers. And he was the more productive pass rusher he has been. I think he had more sacks than Gross Matos before a year ago. Where did he right now? Like, you don't see him listed even in mock drafts. Like, he's falling out of mock drafts. He's like invisible to them. Where do you think he ends up going?
So, I mean, early on, I saw him in like this 3 to 4, third and fourth round kind of area. I think that's a good spot. You mentioned it though. He's got similar skills to Olay and to Utor, Gross Matos, but he's also got the size that Matos has, and I think that's a big benefit. And he's put up the production. I think he's got a slightly better ball skills, and he's a complete player. I think he's played more football than Jason has, which I think is worth thinking about. But I think the third or fourth round is probably right for him. Again, I know the Giants' fourth round, if they don't get a defensive lineman in the first round, maybe.
Well, to kind of grow on that as well, between Olay and Toney, who would you say is more likely to be a successful outside linebacker at the next level?
My gut would say, that's really tough. I was about to say Olay, but I think either of them could do it. I would like to see Shaka be successful on the line. And I think Olay could learn the linebacker position. I think because if Shaka has more experience on the defensive line, I think it'd be kind of silly to have him learn a new position. Whereas Olay hasn't played football as long as Shaka has, and I think he could adjust to it a little bit easier. So I would say Olay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I will also say that if Shaka Toney is there is still available after the Steelers pick the fourth round, I will not be happy. We took Anthony Chicklow in the fifth round, for goodness sakes. We could take Shaka Toney in the fourth. I think he would, that athletic profile and what he shows on film, I would love him as a Steeler. Start off as a rotation guy and just really have the chance to grow. That's a guy I actually really like, and I hope the rest of the league ignores him, but that's not going to happen with his pro day. Mm-hmm. I had a question and I was saying that and I forgot it. Did either of these guys, like especially Shaka Toney, was he a special teams guy at all at any stage of his career? Is he kind of a guy, because where he's kind of falling, he looks to be a player, that's probably going to sit for a year, be a rotational guy for a year, do that. Is he a guy that you think would be a good special teams player? Does he have that kind of attitude and style?
Well, I actually recall, I don't know if he's ever played special teams, but he's definitely a team first guy. I think he would do whatever the team needed as far as that. I mean, think about what Marcus Allen has done for the Steelers. I think he could be in that similar kind of mode. But that's a good question. I don't think he ever played special teams, but I'm sure one of my colleagues could correct me, but I don't remember him, at least for the last couple of years, he didn't play special teams.
No.
Now, maybe we can just transition for a second here, because I know the guy a lot of Steeler fans want to talk about it, and potentially the guy that's most likely to end up on the roster, maybe a little bit of a trade up or trade back, depending to make it work. The big tight end, Pat Friarmuth, one of the many tight ends nicknamed Baby Gronk across the NCAA. There seems to be an infinite amount of those running right now, but when it comes to being a pure tight end, potentially the number one guy, I know Kyle Pitts is the top tight end, but he's more of a super big receiver.
He's a
Yeah.
receiver. Yeah, he's a receiver.
He's a receiver that's like 6'6" and like 240. just a freak. But like pure tight end, I'd say Friarmuth's probably the top guy there. Steeler fans and Steelers radio, like pretty much across the board, we're hearing a lot of comparisons to Heath Miller. Would you buy that? Is that a good comparison?
I've been thinking since I knew I was going to be on your podcast. I've been thinking Heath Miller. That's all. I mean, that's all I think about. Of course, you guys were lucky enough to have the outlaw Jesse James for a while. I think Friarmuth, as we call him, he's a great comparison to Heath Miller. I think he would provide that exact skill set. I think his ability to block has been it's interesting watching the comments about people questioning his ability to block, but he's a great blocker. I mean, I think he's got that's why he's as you said, he's the complete tight end. So I think he'd be a great red zone threat for the Steelers. I think he's got good athleticism, and he's a solid blocker as well.
One of the things, because we're looking at the Steelers just turned over the offense to Matt Canada, and he uses a lot of H-backs, a lot of motion with tight ends. And I've watched Friarmuth's film, but I'll let you answer. I'll let you tell us. Is he a tight end who stays in line? Is he a slot guy? Is he an outside guy, or is he a guy that moves around, plays in the backfield, does all that stuff? What kind of tight end is he?
Oh, he could. Yeah, he definitely could play all over the place. I think he was used more so the last year or so. He was more used as a kind of traditional tight end, but he could definitely move around and play that H-back role. And I don't know if I was aware about Matt Canada coming. That'll be a great spot for him. As much as I would like to, again, that's the last time I'm going to mention the Giants. But I'm not happy that Kyle Rudolph is. I was really unhappy to hear about that move because I was seeing the Giants at 34, I think, in the second round. I think a really attractive spot. But...
That would be a good spot for him.
Yeah. I agree. I think he's fantastic. Penn State's used Friarmuth as a lead blocker at times.
Mm-hmm.
Like he runs out, he can get it from everywhere. Yep. He is fantastic, and he would be a great addition.
Now, can you tell us about his hands? Like, is he a guy that's if the ball just hits him, he's catching it, or is he like a 50-50 receiver? Because we kind of have one of those guys right now, and I know a lot of Steeler fans are kind of frustrated by that. So can you talk about his catching ability?
Oh, he's got great hands. I mean, you could go to YouTube and find the highlight reels of him making one-handed catches, and no, he's got terrific hands. Really, Penn State's been blessed with tight ends the last few years that have had great hands ability, which prior to that, it's been a long time before James came in, really, Jesse James came in, that they had a guy who could catch as well as, I guess we might have to go back even to Kyle Brady, I would guess. That's probably the last time before Jesse James who could catch the ball, and Pat's another one who can, he's definitely a receiving tight end as well as a blocking tight end.
Okay. How fast is he? How much of a receiver is a deep threat? Is he a guy that if you're playing up on him, can he break a big play, or is he going to get run down from behind? How fast is Pat Freeman? Because I know he didn't run at his pro day.
Yeah. I mean, he's got decent speed. He's not Kyle Pitts fast. But
4.4 today.
Right. Yeah. Not quite there. I don't know if he's like a 4.6, 4.7 maybe. I feel like he's run sub 4.6 before. He certainly can run away from guys. He's a little bit slower than I think James was at Penn State. But he can definitely run away from some linebackers for sure.
Now, I know the Steelers typically kind of fall in love with someone from one of the Pennsylvania type teams, be it Pitt or Penn State, whomever. But do you think that's kind of the perfect fit for someone coming out of Penn State and landing on the Steelers team? Would it be Friarmuth, or could it be potentially someone else coming off this roster?
I mean, I think when you're talking about like the Steeler kind of mentality, I think Pat's a great fit. I think he definitely is the kind of workhorse team first guy, and Shaka Toney as well. And not to say that guys like Micah or Jason Olay wouldn't be good fits there. It's just, a Steelers guy. I think Pat fits that mold. So I think the Steelers would be lucky to have him for sure.
I know we're getting closer to the end of our half hour here, but Penn State has several offensive linemen in the draft this year. Are any of them worth anything? I know they have the center, Michael Manet.
Will Fries.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Penn State offensive linemen in the draft?
So Manet is definitely, he's been kind of more streaky. I think he of those two, he's been the more consistent lineman. Fries is big, but he didn't really pan out quite the way that we were hoping for. I think both of those guys could be solid for someone, but I'm not anticipating either of them getting drafted. I think they're going to be undrafted free agents, but I think that both of them could be maybe rotational guys. They're not at the caliber of, say, a Stefan Wisniewski or Connor McGovern are, but they're not that far up from that tier.
Now, of these secondary type players as well, Lamont Wade is a name I've kind of heard starting to climb up some draft boards potentially. Not necessarily like a 6th round, maybe a 7th rounder undrafted free agent type guy, but is he someone you could see kind of stick on a roster and make his way as a special teamer and maybe get some snaps here and there?
Yeah. I think Lamont. I mean, again, Pittsburgh guy, so he's not going for him, but he's got great athleticism. He's starting to do some nice work as a return man this past year for Penn State, which he hadn't really done ever before. The thing about Lamont's he's got a lot of opinions. So I think if he kind of put his head down and just plays football, I think he'll be fine, which I think he can do. But that would be my only concern, would be his environment. Maybe. I think he's got the tools to be a player. He definitely would have to improve on his coverage ability to be a secondary guy. But I think special teams would be a good fit for him for sure.
Out of the guys who probably are going to fall either to the tail end of the draft and have a chance to go undrafted, do any of them stand out to you as like your favorite to have a good NFL career?
That's a tough question. I think. So Shaka. I mean, Shaka is moving back, farther back. I think he's got a shot. I think Lamont Wade has a chance to really again, because of his athleticism. It's tough thinking about a lot of these guys because you don't really know. I mean, we've been burned before by lots of Penn State offensive linemen and kind of other positions. But I guess I'll go with Wade. I think if he kind of gets his head on straight a little bit, I think he could develop into a productive guy.
Now, as we approach the top of our half hour here, Geoffrey, I'm curious if you have any other questions you want to shoot to Lando.
No, I'm good.
Beautiful. Lando, before we let you get out of here, give you an opportunity to plug anything you got going on or anything from your website.
Well, so we're Black Shoe Diaries. We're Penn State's SB Nation blog. We are just about to get started into our pre kind of spring game coverage, covering the previews for the position previews for the upcoming season. We getting more into our other off-season coverage, and I personally do kind of mock draft roundups every couple of weeks leading up to the draft. So if anyone wants to check out those, you can follow us on Twitter at BSDTweet or a blackshoediaries.com.
Awesome. Lando, thank you so much. Appreciate all your time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
And for everyone that is watching right now on YouTube, on Facebook, we will flip over right now to the second part of our podcast, so you can hang out and just hang tough. If you're listening on the podcast side, be it Apple Music, Pandora, Spotify, you name it, wherever you get your podcast from, if you're listening right there, just click over to part 2, and Geoffrey and I will continue on with some of the Steelers news of the day.
The break.
Pittsburgh Steelers fans, we are back for the second half of the Curtain Call podcast. Once again, it is Michael Beck and Geoffrey Benedict joining you as always on these beautiful Wednesday evenings or whenever you happen to be listening to this podcast. But I think the kind of big news today, Geoffrey, Karl Joseph, former Oakland Raiders first-round pick when they were the Oakland Raiders, not the Vegas Raiders, but gone to the Cleveland Browns. He is now visiting the Steelers. That deal isn't done as of the time of recording. That's why I keep checking my phone. But what do you think of this? Would this be a good fit?
I think it's interesting because he fits a mold that we have a lot of players on the roster right now that kind of fit that mold. That like safety, but almost only a box safety, not a deep zone guy, not like really great at that. Where his strengths really are kind of in that box safety, or maybe a guy who could play a dime linebacker role like a Marcus Allen played for us last year. That kind of a player. And we've got several of them. We got Antoine Brooks. We've got Marcus Allen still. We just brought in guy, I forgot his name.
Miles Killebrew.
Yeah, Miles Killebrew, who fits that mold. And now we're looking at another one. It's interesting to me that we are really going for that type of a player. Of course, we had Mark Barron here, in 2019. That was a very similar player as well, kind of that linebacker safety hybrid. So that is something the Steelers are interested in, and that is something that is worth watching. But I don't even know what to make of whether they'll sign him and where he would fit into this roster. Like, it doesn't seem to be a clear open spot for a guy, who is an NFL veteran and is going to expect to play, I would assume.
Yeah, that's kind of the weird fit. But the thing is, Mike Tomlin loves this guy. At his pro day at West Virginia, I believe, they were like this that entire time that was going on. Before the Browns playoff game, Coach Tomlin was asked who are like the best players in the Browns. He starts off by Myles Garrett, and he says, after that, I really think Karl Joseph is the next guy, which really says something, especially when you bring it to here in today's kind of news that he's visiting the Steelers. Now, do you take anything in that in Mike Tomlin's words?
That's the kind of player Mike Tomlin likes. It really is. I mean, we have them. Like, even Minka Fitzpatrick in college was a linebacker / safety. Terrell Edmonds, he's a safety, but people are like, yeah, he could play linebacker, and he really could. Across the board, he likes those type of guys. And how many of them can you put on the field at once? Like, they have to have a real position. They can't just be, a linebacker who's too small to be linebacker. So Karl Joseph is going to have to fit somewhere. He could be the number 3 tight end and be instead of Sean Davis. He could work that, but I don't know. I hope he signs. I'd like to see him because I know Mike Tomlin's a huge fan, and I like his game too.
Yeah, and you know what? On top of that, are the Steelers going to have really good special teams coverage this year? Especially if they make that signing, I feel like their special teams coverage units are going to be absolutely insane.
Yeah, we're going to be cutting. We will end up cutting really good special teams players from the Steelers because there's just too many of them, at every position. It's kind of crazy. We have a ton of special teams guys now.
Yeah, that's it's kind of interesting. I wonder if that's one of the factors the Steelers are looking to bring these guys in on. But on that note, the Steelers did sign 2 guys today as well. Basically, guys that didn't play last year. They signed a receiver early on in this kind of new league year process, kind of the same situation. Today they signed Jarvis Miller, who's a linebacker, and Matthew Sexton, who is a wide receiver that ran 4.3 at, oh goodness, I'm forgetting the
Michigan State.
Michigan State Pro Day. Thank you.
Yeah, he's from Eastern Michigan, but he was at Michigan State's Pro Day this year.
Right. I believe both players is kind of where they were rediscovered by having testing really well at these pro days, which of course is something that some players that don't have a contract are invited to do. And that's where the Steelers find a couple more guys. Do you take anything from these signings?
I remember the Steelers last year talking, and Mike Tomlin talked about how guys from last year's draft class weren't going to get the same shot that other people got. There was no rookie mini camp. There was no, guys at rookie mini camp earning an invite to training camp. None of that happened. James Pierre was our only undrafted free agent that made the roster. Like, there just wasn't the same opportunity for players who were outside of the draft to get a shot in the NFL. And I think that's what you're seeing the Steelers right now do, is sign those guys to these one-year deals while they have roster spots available, get them in the building, work them out, talk to them, see how quickly they learn things, see what they can do. Get your hands on them, see what they look like. To me, it's like it's a rookie camp tryout kind of signing. They're free agents, so you have to pay them. You have to sign them to a contract, but you don't actually pay them. Like, unless these guys got a signing bonus, which I imagine if there is a signing bonus, it would be like money to get an apartment. And that would be it. Like, that kind of thing. But they don't get paid until even the futures contracts, all those contracts, they start paying at week 1 of the season. They don't get paid rookie minicamp. They don't get paid for training camp. They don't get paid any of that off their salary. They have a league negotiated per diem. They get every single day they are required to be at the league facilities, or even I think they get it for voluntary team activities as well. But that's all they get. So these guys signing a contract, that contract really means absolutely nothing except they are a Pittsburgh Steeler. They can say they're a Pittsburgh Steeler, and they can come work out at the facilities and talk to the doctors and talk to the coaches and get, advice and get training, stuff like that from the team that the team offers them. That's it. That's really all that contract means until they actually make the 53-man roster. So to me, this is just the Steelers throwing, undrafted free agent guys, rookie, tryout type deals. They're just going at the 2019 draft class, which I'm all about, because we've seen guys go into those rookie tryouts, make the, training camp, and then make the team. We had a guy, Devlin Hodges did that. He won 3 games in the NFL. He started as a rookie tryout guy, and in that same year he won 3 games. So I'm okay with it. I think it's a great thing. But I think the way it's getting reported, because it's reported as a contract, it's getting more attention in the like, oh, how does this guy fit on the roster? Well, no, he's getting a shot. That's it. Like, this is your shot. See what you can do with it.
Yeah, kind of like a rookie minicamp deal, just a year advance sort of thing. We got a couple questions in the live chat. I'll start off with this one from Andrew Wilbar, who's asking about Sexton, comparing him to Scotty Miller, asking if he could be Scotty Miller 2.0. I don't know if necessarily that's the comparison to go for, but I will say the Steelers really seem to be looking for a slot type guy that is a complete speed burner. We know how interested they are in Anthony Schwartz, the receiver out of Auburn, who ran hand time, I think something in the 4.2s, which it's a pro days. Don't take the numbers too closely, but they are looking for someone to fill that role. And we know this team historically, if they have a hole on the roster, and we're seeing this with some of the moves that come out, they'll bring in someone potentially lower value just to make sure they have someone that can play that role before they fill that role again in the draft, undrafted free agency, or perhaps if someone is cut. Now, Geoffrey, I'll give you the second question here from Javier Mori. He asked, do you think the Steelers pick up the 5th-year option on Terrell Edmunds? And I'll actually pose this to you in 2 ways. One, if they don't sign Carl Joseph, and if they did sign Carl Joseph.
I honestly don't think that would matter. Now do they have to decide on they get till next year to decide whether they want to pick it up, right?
For Minka and Terrell, I believe the deadline for that is like May 3rd. I think it's the Monday after the draft is the deadline for that.
This year.
I think what's different, though, is it can no longer be rescinded. I think that's what the new CBA calls for. So once it's in, locked in.
Well, I believe his 5th year isn't that expensive.
It's $6 million for Terrell, and it's like $12 million for Minka because the new 5th year options are based on like play time, Pro Bowl, All Pro, all those things. So just play time. I think it's him 6.2, something like that.
At 6.2 million, yeah, that's a guy you pick up. That's a guy you keep. His skill set is hard to match. It is really hard to match with people, what he can do, what he brings. It's not something common people do. You can find a guy who is listed as a strong safety who has much better stats than Terrell Edmunds, but they're probably not bringing to the field what Terrell Edmunds brings to the field in terms of matchup negation, where you try and get a mismatch against the Steelers. The Steelers use Terrell Edmunds as a slot cornerback. They use him as a linebacker. They use him as a blitzer. They use him in deep zone. They use him literally everywhere. There are plays he has last year against Seattle. He's in his 2nd year in the league. They lined him up outside across from DK Metcalf, and he deflected the ball. DK Metcalf made a great catch, but he still was with him. He's there. Like this is a guy the Steelers can play literally anywhere, and that is a very big deal in how they run their matchups with their defense. Terrell Edmunds is one of those guys that, to me, he is much more valuable on the Steelers than he is to other teams, and I think they do pick up his option. I think no matter what, they're picking up his 5th year option. I will be surprised if they don't. I would honestly be surprised if they don't.
Yeah, and given the team's history with kind of picking it up with Bud Dupree, who up until that point really didn't break out quite yet. Of course, that 5th year option franchise tag years kind of saw him turn the table, so I could kind of see them going down that route once again. But some more of that news from the Steelers bringing guys in. Yesterday, Tuesday, they signed Kailyn Ballage, formerly of the Miami Dolphins and the San Francisco 49ers, and I also believe the New York Jets. He's bounced around to a couple teams via trade, via cut, but I believe he was drafted in 2018, I want to say was his draft year. Now, Ballage, basically his signing means there's now 5 running backs under contract, not including Derek Watt, already on this roster. Do you see his signing kind of to push someone like Benny Snell, or does this kind of signify that they might be done adding to the position, or what way do you see the signing, if it really means much at all?
Ballage was a really versatile player in college. So there's a chance he could be in that kind of Matt Canada zone where he is more valuable in a Matt Canada system than in other systems. I honestly don't think he's much at all. He seems like a camp body to me. I mean, his yards per carry are worse than anyone we have on the Steelers. His numbers are just bad. His film isn't great. I don't know. Maybe Matt Canada thinks he's worth more than those numbers in the film show, but I have a hard time seeing him pushing anyone off the roster, honestly.
Yeah, and that is definitely noteworthy. So you'd say the Steelers are still 100% in on trying to find their future workhorse in the first couple rounds of the draft.
I am not so on board with that. I'm of the opinion that if the running back is there that they want, and it's their number one guy, they will take him. I honestly expect what every Steeler fan is really against, and I expect another mid-round running back. I'm leaning that direction now, where they're going to wait, get somebody in the 3rd or 4th round, and Steelers fans' heads are going to explode.
You know what? I would have said that move kind of made sense to me before they added Ballage, but oh my, they have a lot of below average NFL running backs on the roster. And honestly, I'm probably putting that pretty nicely. So I feel like if they're not going big, then I suppose this is just kind of the running back room we're going to have come the season, which is probably not ideal. Perhaps they could find someone else on the open market, even though anyone who has any talent or name value is old. So Do you think the Steelers just kind of put the cherry on top of that running back room with just a mid-round running back, or could it come somewhere else as well?
Oh, I still think it's a good chance James Conner ends up back in Pittsburgh. The Steelers are weird in that they talk run game, but they don't back that up with investment. They don't really back it up. And the only running back they've ever tried to pay was Le'Veon Bell. And thank goodness he said no, because that was not good. That was not a good choice. We draft pass blocking, offensive linemen. We draft this is how we do things. We do, and then we say we're going to focus on running the ball. We're going to be a running team, and then we let most of our offensive line go. We bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, so we're 4 deep at wide receiver. I don't see a commitment to the run game backed up in action as much as it is just words. And so I don't expect investment. I would not be surprised by it. I think you could see an Etienne in the first round. I think you could still see a guy in the first round, a running back go. But it's just as likely not. It's just as likely not to me. I always go back to people say oh, the running back room is bad. They have to draft a running back. Well, go back and look at the 2014, 2015 heading into those seasons. Look at the cornerback room. Steelers didn't have a corner. They didn't have one. They had 4 number 3 cornerbacks, and they just went into the season with it. They were all right, Bryce McCain, you're a starter. That's how they did it. They could do it at running back. We've done it before. We had Jonathan Dwyer and Isaac Redmond as the feature runners there for a year too. It could happen.
Yeah, with their holes too. To me, I feel like it's kind of hard to justify grabbing a running back highly at all until they kind of plug up some of these other spaces. Because if you don't have a number 1 center, it might not matter who your running back is, because they're just getting someone in their lap the second they touch the ball, and then they're getting tackled for a loss. So yeah,
if you don't have a center, you don't have a quarterback, and you don't have a running game. You don't have anything. If you don't have offensive line, it doesn't matter. Ben Roethlisberger is going to look like he did for those games where J.C. Hassenauer was playing, and he was throwing the ball to whoever he was looking at a second and a half into the play, because that's how much time he had to get rid of the ball, and it was bad. It was terrible. We couldn't run. We couldn't do anything. That's what you're talking about if this offensive line isn't fixed.
And to me, right now, I would say it's probably not the sexy pick by any means, and it would definitely be a reach, but the Steelers haven't signed someone for that center spot. So I almost expect come the draft, when number 24 has been called, it ends up being a center, just because the need at that position is so high. And do you want to start someone who you got out of the 3rd round right away? That seems a little dangerous, and just not the way this team operates. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, although I also feel they might think BJ Finney is the guy.
Why? I don't get this.
I don't know either, but they like BJ. He's just a guy that they like. You hear reports from people who are around the team and insiders that Ben Roethlisberger trusts this guy, and the Steelers like this guy, and maybe he's their starter. And I'm like, well, then you don't have a run game. Then you don't have a run blocking offense. You just don't have it. What do you have at that point? And that could just be the Steelers being hey, no, we don't. Wink, wink. We don't need to draft a center. We're happy with what we've got. Definitely aren't going to be drafting center at 24. It could be that. But the Steelers have walked into a season with worse position rooms in this offensive line, although not many. And I can't. Oh man, if they walk in there with this offensive line, they don't draft anybody, they don't sign anybody new, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, that's going to be the storyline until I guess we hit training camp and really kind of see what happens. Because me living fairly close to Seattle, that's the coverage I'm getting if I'm listening to sports radio at work. And that was one of the talking points. Is this BJ Finney guy, we kind of invested a lot of money, and he's already kind of bounced off the starting depth. he was supposed to be the starter at center. Now he's like the sixth man. Now he's like a reserve. Like, what is going on? Like, by the day, he just fell further and further down that depth chart. So that is a little bit concerning. Hopefully he gets it under wraps. But to move on from that, of course, Finney was released from the Bengals and then brought back to the Steelers. Another player that I think a lot of people kind of assumed once he was released would end up back in Pittsburgh. Of course, that being Jesse James, a name that was kind of mentioned in the first part of our podcast. It hasn't happened yet. And to kind of backtrack a little bit, he was released, so he wouldn't mean anything, the compensatory formula. And he had a head start on free agency. Insiders like Jerry Dulac, I believe Mark Caboli, like you go on and on. A lot of these people just thought like, oh, it's just kind of a guaranteed move that's just going to happen. There's no penalty in the move happening early. Why hasn't that happened yet? And do you think at this point it's even going to happen at all?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It makes so much sense. You have Eric Ebron. Ideally, you want him to not be your inline tight end. Jesse James is an inline tight end. He is that guy. Just line him up inline, and that would let Eric Ebron move around. Jesse James isn't a great guy, but he's not like the tight end you want. He's no Heath Miller, but he's solid. And Ben got a lot out of him. You look at that 2018 season. Ben Roethlisberger and Jesse James put up decent numbers for a number 2 tight end. I believe they were like number 1 in the NFL for tight end production and efficiency in 2018 with Jesse James and Vance McDonald. There's no reason Eric Ebron and Jesse James wouldn't be a good pairing. But it does make you wonder, are the Steelers really committed to getting someone in free agency or in the draft who fits a more versatile mold? Because Jesse James is not going to be playing H-back. He's not going to be, a heavy motion use guy. He's 6'9". He's like too tall for like lead blocking. You're not going to make a 6'9" guy your lead blocker. That's probably not going to go well.
You know what? And they could bring in a guy like Jesse James. Like, to me, you look at the Buccaneers who won the Super Bowl last year, and their tight end depth chart, they probably had 5 guys, 4 of which would have been the number 1 tight end in Pittsburgh. So I wouldn't even have a problem bringing Jesse James in and then double dipping in the draft and just having a solid tight end room. I don't see really any problems with that, but kind of looking at the last few days and all these moves the Steelers have made, all these kind of secondary depth, potentially just camp body type signings. Do you think there's any clarity to the upcoming draft starting to form, or is it just as murky as ever?
I think it's still just as murky as ever. There's so many ways. I mean, there's positions that are kind of ruled out, like wide receiver is out. Defensive line is out. You're not getting one of those, sadly, as it is for me. They're not getting a defensive lineman in the first round. Yeah, I don't like outside linebacker. You're not getting an outside linebacker in the first round, no matter what some people might say. Safety, no. You could see a cornerback. You could see an inside linebacker. Offensive line, yeah. Running back, yeah. Tight end, yeah. Quarterback, no. Running back, yeah. Like, there's a lot of position, but so there is some, but it's not at all. There's a lot of room where the Steelers could draft a first round player, and people would be like, well, yeah, they drafted that because that's what they need. But there's like 6 or 7 positions still that you can draft that and be like, yeah, of course they drafted that. That's what they need.
I got a feeling we'll see something along the lines of best player available and then draft the best need available, if that makes any sense, where they just take the best player because most likely it's going to be a fit with their holes.
Yeah. And
then outside of that, just like, well, we need a starting center now. Let's go get a starting center. Well, you need a starting running back. Let's go get a number 1 running back. We need number 2 tight end. Let's go get, like, so on and so forth down the draft. I don't even know if hopefully is the way to go about it, but I think that's something we could see in this draft process, though, which is something I think is somewhat notable. A lot of these mid-round quarterbacks are coming out and saying they met with the Steelers. Kyle Trask today said about a month or 2 ago he talked with Mike Tomlin, which seems like a long amount of time. So perhaps not the interest there, but Jamie Newman, Georgia Wake Forest quarterback. He never actually played for Georgia because of opting out. He said he's talked to the Steelers a number of occasions. Kellen Mond the day before. Do you think the Steelers could be, as Art Rooney said, adding to that quarterback depth chart with someone from the middle rounds?
I think that is increasingly more possible the longer we go into this and the more quarterbacks they talk to. It's a little surprising to me when you added a Haskins, you have Rudolph, who they have a lot of faith in and who has developed. You know, he's developed and he's developing into a pretty decent quarterback. It's interesting to me. I don't know how they juggle them all. I don't know where they'd land up, but I think it is quite possible you see a quarterback added.
Yeah, and I feel like if they don't draft someone, I feel like going back to the Josh Dobbs makes the most sense just because of his relationship with Ben. Do you think perhaps Art Rooney might not have said the right thing when it comes to this quarterback spot, or do you think they're going to bring in someone no matter what?
I don't think it's a no matter what situation, but it might not be far off from a no matter what situation. It might just be that they're like, hey, no, mid-round, we're going to get somebody to add to this room. It's almost like a quarterback approach, similar to what they've done with running backs and wide receivers. Let's just take them in the third or fourth round. You know, if you don't have some, which isn't the worst case scenario. If you've got a bunch of guys that you're sitting there looking at and saying, well, this guy could be good, but there's a lot of ifs, there's a lot of question marks with him. Steelers like sure things early, players that they look at and say, no matter what, this guy is going to fill a role. You know, Bud Dupree, even if he doesn't get sacks, he's starting on that outside because we know what he can give us in certain other areas. Terrell Edmonds starts every single game, no matter what. Like, that's the kind of first round guys they go for. So taking some lottery picks on quarterbacks in the third or fourth round, that's kind of something the Steelers are doing right now.
And to continue on with this quarterback stuff, of course, Albert Breer talked about it, and really a lot of kind of outlets jumped on it. Sam Darnold, the Jets quarterback, who he's definitely going to be on the trade block because it seems like they are dead set on drafting one Zack Wilson out of BYU. I think the latest rumor said they're looking for as low as a fourth round pick now. Do you see any way that makes any sense for the Steelers to do? I know that's kind of the popular name floating out there right now, but does it make any sense whatsoever?
No, not to me. I'm not interested in Sam Darnold. Juju Smith-Schuster made him look good. You watch his college film. And in New York, like, people are like, oh, but he's on the Jets. Well, look what Mason Rudolph did in 2019. Who did he have? When Juju Smith-Schuster got hurt, who did he have at receiver? James Washington, rookie Deontay Johnson, and yet his numbers aren't that much different than what Sam Darnold was putting up with a Robbie Anderson and Jamison Crowder. Like, he had solid receivers. You saw Mason Rudolph play with absolutely, in this year against Cleveland, Mason Rudolph had 300 yards with an offensive line that did include J.C. Hassenauer. And like, they were banged up. That offensive line was banged up. He produced. He can do it. To me, Sam Darnold is on that Mason Rudolph level, and you already got one. You know, I don't like Sam Darnold's arm. I don't like his thought process, if that makes sense, and how he goes about his plays. I'm not a Darnold fan. Perfect.
Now, the last bit of news I want to get to before we wind out this show is the 17th game. It is official. The Steelers will be hosting the Seattle Seahawks, adding to the gauntlet schedule they already have. How do you feel about this? Do you like the game? Do you like 17 regular season games? What are your thoughts on game number 17?
I don't like change. I don't like new things. I'm a cranky old man, so I don't like any of this newfangled 17 games.
Man yells at cloud.
I do like that Mike Tomlin's going to have to really put in work to go 8-8 next year. Really going to have to put in that work and get a tie. I don't know how he's going to do that. But it's a thing. It happened. It's going to happen. I like that they're playing Seattle. because Seattle refuses to protect Russell Wilson. So we get some sack numbers there. Yes. But that's another, like, I loved going through stats. And you go back in history, and all of a sudden, like when the 14 games changed to 16 games, it's a whole different era. Yeah. And now it's going to annoy me to no end when every year they're like, someone just broke an NFL record. Yeah, okay. You know, you have an extra game now, and it's going to be more yards. It's going to be more of that. I'm not a fan. Teams wear down. The teams do wear down. This is going to be, you know, you're talking about depth being more important and stars being less important kind of a situation, and I don't like that. I don't like that. Like, we watch the NFL for the stars, not who has the least bad fifth cornerback. We saw that in this year with the COVID. Like when teams get down players, like, you don't want that. And at some point, somebody's going to come into the NFL and run like how the NBA does, where they watch their snaps and say, you only get so many snaps, and then we're going to rest you. And you're going to have this going on if this keeps up. Like, it's just going to happen to try and have players be able to play when it comes to game 20 of the season. Like, you still need them. It's game 20 and you're in the playoffs. So I'm not big on it, but it's here. It's a thing. I like playing the Seahawks.
Now, before we get out, and still kind of on that same topic, I believe now that it's voted in, it's going to be 17 games until the end of this collective bargaining agreement. 17 is kind of an ugly number. So is 3 preseason games. What do you think's more likely? So we can look back on this 10 years from now, if we even remember. But what's more likely? Them moving to 18 games or going back down to 16?
They will never go back. Once they add a game and they add that revenue, they will never go back. So 18, yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that's where it ends up?
Probably not. I mean, probably for a while, and eventually they add more. It's just greed. Like you can't expand. It was before, like, if you want a money grab, you sell an expansion team and everyone gets paid. All the owners got huge chunks of money and there's a whole nother team. But there's no appetite for expansion now. So you expand the season. You can't go into a new city, so you just take another week and spread into Valentine's Day.
Yeah, that's Super Bowl, whatever, like 61 or whatnot, coming to you on Valentine's Day. I'm sure that's going to go over well in a lot of households, but aside from divorce rates going up the next day, anyway, it is the top of the hour for our show. So before we get out, Geoffrey, do you have anything you want to plug?
I'm trying to think what we just did. Oh, we did Dave and I did a Vertex on Tyson Alualu. It's a good one. Like Dave pointed out some good stuff to me. I looked it up and it worked out, and it actually helped me make a pretty good film room out of it. And I've got one coming on Joe Hayden in week 10. And I've got some stuff. I got some stuff that I'm working on for next week, a collaboration with Kevin Smith. Not a film room, but we're going to talk about different players in the draft. So that I'm excited for that. Just, keep watching the site. There's a lot of good stuff.
Perfect. Looking forward to that. Absolutely. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure to hit like, subscribe, 5 stars, wherever you're listening. If you're on Apple Podcasts, 5 stars, comments. I know co-editor Jeff Hartman likes to read those out on his morning Let's Ride shows. And of course, if you're listening to this one, make sure you're clicking out on some of those exclusive podcast side platform only shows. You got My Live Mike, Dave Schofield, Stack Geek, and of course those Let's Ride from Jeff Hartman. So outside of that, again, make sure you're clicking over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. You're really not finding any better Steelers content across the entire internet, and I believe that wholeheartedly. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for hanging out with us tonight. We will see you guys soon. Thank you again, and great chat.